So we've looked at some of the features that behave slightly differently in Azure SQL database compared to on-premises. Now we've got a list, not necessarily an exhaustive list, but a list of features that just aren't supported in Azure SQL database at all. These include the SQL browser service, file stream, common language runtime or SQL CLR, resource governor, global temporary tables, log shipping, the use database name statement, system store procedures, trace flags, and SQL trace and profiler. So the unsupported feature list then. We started with the SQL browser service. Now the SQL browser service is a Windows service that provides instant and post information to incoming connection requests. This isn't required with Azure SQL database as it listens on port 1433 only. File stream, Azure SQL database doesn't support file stream or file table, which sits on top of file streaming, and this is just because of the PaaS nature of the Azure SQL database service. There is a workaround to use Azure storage. However, this would require a rework on the application and database side of things. Common language runtime is not supported in Azure SQL database. SQL CLR allows users to write programmable database objects such as store procedures, functions, and triggers in managed code. It allows .NET to run in the SQL Server memory space in effect. This can provide a significant performance improvement in certain situations. Now, initially, when Azure SQL Database first came out, SQL CLR was supported, but support was later removed due to concerns around security. Resource Governor. Now, Resource Governor allows you to try and control what resources certain sessions use in your database. So you can throttle or limit resources such as CPU, memory, storage, as per different SQL Server workloads. If you've got a stacked environment, a consolidated environment, you can limit perhaps what each session is able to do and when it's able to do it. This Resource Governor feature is not available in Azure SQL Database. Now, Azure SQL Database, it comes with different service tiers. Each is suitable for different workloads. So you would pick the tier according to the workload of your database. So you're going to need to evaluate the performance tier your application workload is going to fit into, and then accordingly provision the database for that performance tier. Global temporary tables, they're not supported in Azure SQL Database. Global temporary tables get defined by the double hash symbol, and these are accessible by all sessions. So if you were using them on premises, you prefix your table with double hash. That will say it's a global temporary table. That will be available to all sessions. They aren't supported in Azure SQL Database. Only local temporary tables are available or allowed in Azure SQL Database. Now, log shipping. This is the process of taking transaction log backups, copying them to another server, and restoring them there to maintain a warm standby. So the log shipping is not supported in Azure SQL Database. It's commonly used as a high availability and disaster recovery solution or tool, and it can also be really useful in helping migrate your databases to a different server. And log shipping isn't supported in Azure SQL Database. However, there are other high availability and disaster recovery features you can make use of. SQL Trace and Profiler are not supported in Azure SQL Database. SQL Trace and Profiler can't be used to capture events and capture workloads on Azure SQL Database. As of now, there's no direct alternative other than using dynamic management views or monitoring using the Azure portal and possibly using extended events. Trace flags, which with an on-premises version of SQL Server can be used to affect the features that are available or the behavior of SQL Server. So you can turn on or turn off particular aspects of SQL Server. These are not available at all in Azure SQL Database. Azure SQL Database doesn't support all of the system store procedures supported in an on-premises SQL Server. System store procedures such as SP add message, SP help user, and SP configure aren't supported In a nutshell, procedures related to features unsupported in Azure SQL database aren't supported in Azure SQL database. The use statement or the use database statement, this is used to switch context from one database to another. And again, this feature isn't supported in Azure SQL database.